It always begins when the world is at its quietest, when the rest of the neighborhood is asleep, when even the crickets outside have gone silent, and every shadow seems just a little darker than usual. For one woman, that moment came at exactly 3 a.m. A sound woke her, 3 slow knocks at the door, not frantic, not hurried, just steady, deliberate. She froze in her bed, straining to listen, praying it was her imagination. But then she heard it again, 3 knocks echoing through the silence of the house. Each step seemed louder than the last, as though the house itself was warning her not to continue. The dog at her feet whimpered, hackles raised, his body trembling with a fear she had never seen before. Still, the knocking persisted. When she finally reached the door, her hand hovered over the lock. She whispered to herself, who could it be at this hour? Slowly, carefully, she peered through the peephole, and what she saw froze her blood. It wasn't someone lost or in need or looking for help. No, standing there was her sister, the same sister who had died in a car accident years before. Same clothes, same face, same eyes staring directly into hers through the peephole. The woman stumbled back, heart pounding, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. And then, the thing outside spoke. It called her name in the same voice she remembered from childhood. Soft, but wrong in a way she couldn't explain. The dog began to bark wildly, teeth bared, as if trying to drive it away. Then came the sound of nails, long, sharp nails, scraping against the wooden door. Not gently, not asking for entry, but clawing, demanding it. That woman lived to tell her story, but to this day, she swears it wasn't her sister standing there. She swears something else had worn her sister's face. And to this day, her neighbors still report seeing that figure, waiting on the porch at 3 a.m. 7 accounts from real people who came face to face with things that cannot be explained, things that linger in the corners of our world when the lights go out. Some made it out alive, some never spoke again, but all of them were left with scars that time could never erase. So, lock your doors, check your windows, turn the lights down low. Because once these stories begin, you may find yourself listening a little more closely. If that story already sent a chill down your spine, trust me, what comes next will only get darker. Make sure you're subscribed, tap the like button, and stay with me until the very end, because the final story tonight is the one that haunts people the most. You don't want to miss it. Hospitals are strange places at night. By day they feel like sanctuaries of healing, bright, full of footsteps, voices, and the constant rhythm of life. But when the sun sets, when the last visitors leave and the hallways fall silent, the same hospital transforms into something else entirely. The air feels colder, every sound echoes a little too long, and the shadows seem to breathe on their own. This story nurse, who comes from, call her Maria, who worked the night shift at St. Clair's Hospital, a facility that had been running for nearly a century. Parts of it had been renovated, modernized, painted over. But one wing, tucked away on the 3rd floor, had been abandoned years earlier after a fire damaged most of the rooms. It was supposed to stay locked and unused. Staff joked about it often, calling it the forgotten floor. Still, every nurse knew better than to linger near it. On this particular night, Maria was covering an unusually quiet shift. Only a handful of patients were on her floor, most already asleep. The hum of fluorescent lights filled. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air. She busied herself with charts, checking vitals, making her rounds. Everything was ordinary, until, just after 2:30 a.m., she heard it. Ding. The sound of a patient call button, a soft chime that usually meant someone needed help. Water, pain medication, maybe assistance to the restroom. Maria looked at her monitor, and her blood ran cold. The room number flashing wasn't from the occupied section. It was room 311. That couldn't be right. Room 311 was in the abandoned wing. No patients had been housed there in years. She assumed it was a glitch, some electrical interference from the old wiring. Still, Procedure required her to check it out. So she grabbed her flashlight and started down the long corridor. The deeper she walked, the quieter the hospital became. The clean, sterile brightness faded behind her. The hallway narrowed, paint peeling along the walls. The overhead lights flickered faintly, buzzing as if straining to stay alive. Her shoes tapped against. By the time she reached the double doors that led into the old wing, her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. The doors groaned when she pushed them open. Beyond lay darkness. The smell changed immediately, less antiseptic, more stale, like damp paper and something faintly metallic. She told herself it was just disuse, dust, maybe rusting pipes. Her flashlight beam cut across the floor, catching old wheelchairs, overturned gurneys, sheets draped over equipment like pale bodies lying in wait. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle. It opened without resistance. The room was empty. No bed, no equipment, no patient, just cracked paint, a broken monitor, and a chair shoved into the corner. She laughed nervously to herself, muttering about faulty wiring. Then, ding, the call button chimed again, louder this time, inside the very room she was standing in. She spun toward the wall panel and froze. The light was on. The button was lit, as if someone invisible had just pressed it. Her flashlight flickered, sputtered, then steadied. That's when she saw it. A shadow. Not cast by her, not cast by the beam. A tall, human-shaped silhouette standing in the far corner of the room. Completely still. Completely black. Watching. Maria's breath throat. She couldn't move. Caught in her. Then, one of the old monitors on the floor crackled to life. A long, high-pitched beep filled the room, flatlining. The kind of sound that usually signals a patient's heart stopping. But there was no patient, no power, no reason for it to come alive. Maria stumbled backward, whispering a prayer under her breath. The shadow seemed to inch closer. Not walking, not moving normally, just closing the space between them in an unnatural way. She bolted into the hallway, heart pounding. She reached for her radio to call security, but it only spat static. Then, another sound. The squeak of wheels. Slowly, deliberately, like a gurney being pushed along the tiles. She turned her head and saw one rolling toward her, even though no one was behind it. She ran faster, her shoes slapping against the tile. She ducked into the supply room, slammed the door, and pressed her back against it. Her breath came in. For a moment there was silence, then scratching, soft at first, then louder. Something was dragging along the outside of the door, then knocking. Slow, steady, knocking that seemed to echo in her bones. Maria pressed her hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. The handle rattled, once, twice, then it stopped. She waited in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, when she could no longer hear anything, she dared to push the door open. The hallway was empty. Completely still, as if nothing had happened. Maria didn't finish her shift. She handed in her badge the very next morning. Others have since taken over her duties, but the story spread through the hospital quickly. Today, if you ask the staff about the third floor, they'll shake their heads and tell you they avoid it at all costs. But if you listen closely, on a quiet night, some say you can still hear the call button chiming, room 311 summoning someone who isn't really there. Would you dare to work alone in a haunted hospital like this? Tell me in the comments if you'd last a single shift. Story 2, The Babysitter's Nightmare. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday night. A teenage babysitter, let's call her Emily, had just settled onto the couch of a quiet suburban home. The parents had left for a late dinner in the city, leaving her in charge of their 2 young children already asleep upstairs. The house was large but cozy, the kind of place with wide living room windows and polished wood floors that echoed with every step. Emily grabbed the remote, turning on the television to chase away the silence, but the storm outside only made the atmosphere heavier. The family's dog, a golden retriever, kept growling low under its breath, staring toward the staircase as if it sensed something she could not see. Lightning flashed through the windows. The shadows of the furniture stretched long and thin across the walls. The TV flickered, the signal briefly distorted by the storm. Emily pulled a blanket closer around her, trying to shake off the chill. Every so often, the dog would suddenly bark at the dark hallway, making her heart skip. She told herself it was just the weather, until the landline rang. It wasn't the parents. It wasn't a wrong number. It was silence. She hung up, unsettled, but within minutes, it rang again, and again. And every time the voice on the line didn't speak, it only breathed. Emily tried to calm herself. She checked the locks on the front and back doors. They were still bolted. The children were safe in their rooms upstairs. Everything was fine, but when she returned to the living room, she noticed something strange. The toy truck she had picked up earlier was back in the middle of the hallway. She froze. Had she forgotten to put it away? Or had someone moved it? Another call came through. This time she answered with shaking hands. A low male voice whispered, "Have you checked children?" Emily's stomach dropped. Her eyes darted to the staircase. Emily's hand trembled as she picked up the phone to call the parents, but before she could dial, she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps moving across the second floor. She knew the children were asleep. They couldn't be walking, and yet, the sound of a door creaking open echoed down the hallway. But down the hallway, another door, a guest room, was now wide open, and she remembered closing it earlier. Her phone rang again. She answered. The same whisper, "You shouldn't be here." Emily's hands shook as she dialed 911. Another incoming call, unknown number. She froze. Should she ignore it? Something in her gut told her not to, but she answered anyway. And what she heard made her blood run cold. "Emily, I can see you." Her eyes darted around the dark hallway, searching for any movement. A shadow, a man. Emily bolted down the stairs, clutching the phone. The children were still safe, but she could hear the intruder moving above her. The police arrived minutes later, their flashlights sweeping through the home. But when they checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place, no one was there. Rain dripping on the windowsill, mud-stained footprints leading across the floor. The officer turned to Emily and said the words she'd never forget. "Whoever he was already inside before you even got here. So tell me, what would you do if you discovered the danger was already inside your house?" If this story chilled you to the bone, don't forget to subscribe, because the stories only get darker from here. Hit the like button to let me know you're brave enough to keep listening. And stay until the very end, because the last story in this compilation may haunt you long after you've turned off the screen. Story 3, The Haunting at the Motel. When you're exhausted on the road, you'll take any place that promises a bed, 4 walls, and a door you can lock. But sometimes, it's safer to keep driving. It was close to midnight when Eric pulled into the cracked parking lot of a lonely roadside motel. The neon sign buzzed in and out, its red letters reading only Mem, Tell, because half the bulbs had long since died. The office was lit by a single yellow bulb, swarmed with moths. Inside, the clerk barely looked up, sliding a key across the counter with a muttered, "Room 6. The hallway leading to his room smelled faintly of mildew and old cigarettes. Wallpaper peeled in strips, curling like withered skin, and the carpet squished with a dampness he didn't want to think about. He told himself, it's just for one night. When he unlocked the door, the air was stifling, heavy with the stale odor of sweat and something metallic, like rust or dried blood. The humming of the old air conditioner was constant, but it didn't cool the room. Dropping his duffel bag, he switched on the bedside lamp, only to see a faint indentation on the mattress, as if someone had just been sitting there. At first he laughed nervously, chalking it up to bad springs. He turned on the TV, static fuzzing across the screen, and tried to distract himself. Outside, the neon flickered in through the thin curtains, painting the room in pulsing red shadows. That's when he heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway. They stopped directly in front of his door. Silence. Then, a soft scrape against the doorframe. His skin prickled. He whispered to himself, "It's just another guest. Don't be paranoid." But the odd thing was, he hadn't seen a single other car in the lot. He tried the phone by the bed, thinking of calling the front desk, but when he lifted the receiver, the line was already open. Nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. His pulse hammered in his ears. He hung up quickly, backing away from the nightstand. The mattress sagged. Eric turned slowly, and his stomach dropped. A dark figure was seated at the edge of the bed. Its shape was human but wrong, slouched, head tilted too far forward, shoulders hunched. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. Heart racing, Eric lunged for the light switch, but the lamp flickered violently, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. The hum of the AC grew louder, almost like a growl. Behind him, the bed springs groaned as the figure began to rise. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice breaking. No answer. Just the dragging of heavy footsteps approaching from behind. Eric rammed his shoulder into the door until it flew open, spilling him into the hallway. He bolted down the corridor, not daring to look back, until he burst into the office. Breathless, he demanded the clerk call the police. The clerk just stared at him blankly and said something that froze his blood. "Son, no one's been in room 6 for years. We don't rent it out. People say it's cursed. That's where those murders happened." Eric left his bag behind, sprinting to his car and peeling out of the lot without looking back. In the rearview mirror, he swore he saw someone standing at the window of room 6 watching him leave, waiting for him to come back. If you checked into a motel and found out your room had a bloody past, would you stay or run into the night like Eric? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story gave you chills, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next nightmare. Hit like to let me know you want more, and stay with me until the end of this video, because the scariest story is still waiting for you. If you thought a haunted motel room was terrifying, wait until you hear what happens when the wilderness itself becomes the enemy. Imagine being deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town, where every snapping twig makes your heart race, and every shadow between the trees could be watching you. Some say the forest hides things far older and darker than we can understand. And in our next story, one camper learned that sometimes the woods aren't empty at all. Something is out there, something that doesn't want you to leave alive. Story 4. The Cabin in the Woods. The night began like any other camping trip. 4 friends, Emma, Josh, Tyler, and Mia, had ventured deep into the woods, far from the noise of the city, eager for a weekend of laughter, stories, and escape. Their campsite sat beside an old abandoned cabin, its wooden frame slouched with age, as if it were barely standing. They joked about it being haunted, the kind of place horror movies always warned you about. The wind howled through the trees in low, mournful tones. At first, it was all fun, roasting marshmallows, telling scary stories, and laughing at each other's attempts to spook the group. But then, the silence came, the kind of silence that swallows laughter and presses against your skin. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Emma was the first to notice something strange. She pointed to the tree line. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered. They. For a moment, only the wind answered. But then, yes, a faint sound, like twigs snapping, like something moving, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Josh, ever the brave one, laughed it off. Probably a deer, or maybe a raccoon sniffing for food. He tossed another log on the fire, sending shadows dancing across the cabin's rotting walls. But Mia wasn't convinced. When they awoke the next morning, their supplies were scattered. Food bags torn open, water bottles gone, and carved into the bark of the trees around. The laughter from the night before felt like a memory. By the second night, the woods seemed alive. Every gust of wind carried with it the whisper of voices, too faint to make out, but chilling all the same. Tyler swore he saw something moving between the trees, a tall, hunched figure, slipping away just as his flashlight landed on it. The group's unease turned to fear. Then, just after midnight, Mia screamed. Her tent was empty. The others searched frantically, calling her name until their voices cracked, but the forest only echoed their cries back to them. And then came the whispers, clearer now, close, too close. They spun in every direction, but the voices always seemed just behind them, circling, laughing, growing louder. The firelight shrank as the darkness pressed in, and that's when they saw it. A figure, tall, gaunt, its limbs too long for its body, its face shrouded. It moved with a sickening, jerking gait, like it didn't quite belong to this world. The friends ran. Branches clawed at their skin as they tore through the forest, the thing crashing after them with inhuman speed. Tyler was the next to vanish. One moment he was beside Emma, the next his scream cut through the night, and then silence. Only Emma and Josh remained. They stumbled upon the old cabin, slamming the door shut behind them. Inside, the smell of rot filled their lungs. On the walls, the whispers grew deafening. The door splintered, and then darkness. When the sun rose, a lone figure staggered out of the woods. Emma, pale, broken, trembling. She was the only one who made it back. Her story was dismissed by some as hysteria, but others believed her. And to this day, locals say if you wander too deep into that forest, and if you listen closely, you'll still hear the whispers. So tell me, would you risk spending a night alone in the woods, knowing something might be watching you from the trees? Imagine being out there, cut off from the world, with nothing but trees and shadows closing in. Would you risk spending a night alone in the woods, knowing something might be watching? And speaking of darker, our next tale takes us beneath the surface, where an old mine hides secrets better left buried. Story 5: The Stalker on the Highway. The night stretched endlessly across the open highway, black and unforgiving. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of tires against the asphalt. A young woman, Claire, gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. She wasn't used to long night drives, but she had no choice. She needed to get back home, and the only road available was a desolate, two-lane stretch of highway that cut through miles of empty fields and forest. Occasionally, the trees on either side leaned over the road like silent watchers. The silence was thick, no other cars, no sign of life, just her and the endless ribbon of road. That was when she noticed it. In her rearview mirror, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. At first, she felt relief. Another car on the highway meant she wasn't entirely alone. She let out a small laugh at her own nerves, but relief soon gave way to unease. It wasn't falling behind either. It just stayed there, at the exact same distance, its headlights locked onto her like two unblinking eyes. Claire told herself it was just coincidence. Maybe they were heading in the same direction. Still, her pulse quickened. Minutes turned into miles. The car remained there. She pressed the gas a little harder. Her car sped up. The headlights behind her sped up. She frowned, her palms growing sweaty on the wheel. Then, suddenly, the car flashed its high beams. Bright light filled her rearview mirror, blinding her for a second. "Okay, what the hell?" she muttered under her breath. She tapped her brakes slightly, hoping the driver would back off. Instead, the car swerved closer, weaving dangerously into her lane before pulling back. The beam of light flickered again. On, off, on. Claire's heart pounded. Wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone was toying with her. The thought that she was being stalked began to crawl into her mind like a cold hand. She grabbed her phone from the passenger seat, but of course, no signal. Just the mocking no service sign at the top of the screen. Stay calm, just stay calm, don't stop. The car stayed glued behind her, lights flashing, swerving closer with every mile. And then, just when she thought her nerves couldn't take anymore, something changed. She felt it, a presence, the faintest shift in the air behind her. She froze. Slowly, very slowly, her eyes darted to the rear view. Her blood ran cold. There, in the shadows of her car, a figure was crouched low, unmoving. Her mouth went dry. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. The car behind her wasn't trying to hurt her. They were trying to warn her. Panic surged through her veins. She wanted to slam on the brakes, fling the door open, and run, but the highway stretched. And that thing in her backseat hadn't moved. She couldn't even hear it breathing. The car behind her surged forward, flashing its lights even more frantically. Adrenaline kicked in. Claire swerved sharply, pulling over to the side of the road. She barely had time to shove the car into park before throwing herself out of the driver's seat, stumbling into the gravel shoulder. The other car screeched to a halt behind her, its driver's door flying. A man jumped out shouting, "Don't go back! Don't!" But it was too late. Her car door was still wide open, the interior lights glowing faintly. The back seat was empty. The crouched figure was gone. Claire's hands trembled violently. She swore she had seen it. The outline of a man hunched low, waiting. The stranger who had followed her stood frozen a few feet away, his chest heaving as if he'd run away. His eyes darted to her car, then back to the dark stretch of woods on the other side of the road. "Someone was in there," he whispered, almost to himself. "I saw him when you drove under the streetlight. He was sitting up. Then he ducked down." Claire's stomach twisted. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The man looked around wildly, then back at her. "I don't know where he went, but he's not in the car anymore." The road was empty, quiet, except for the buzz of the idling engines. Then, from somewhere in the woods, a branch snapped. Claire and the man both whipped their heads toward the sound, but nothing was there. The stalker, whether man or something else, had vanished into the night. But to this day, every time Claire drives alone at night, she checks her mirror again and again, terrified of what she might see. And the man who saved her? She never saw him again either. He disappeared just as mysteriously as the figure he had warned her about. You're driving down a lonely highway in the dead of night, no other cars in sight, just the steady hum of your engine and the endless stretch of road ahead. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appear in your rearview mirror. At first, you think nothing of it, just another late-night traveler. But then, the car doesn't pass. It stays behind you, mile after mile. Every turn you make, they follow. They flash their lights, swerve close, and your heart begins to pound. Now tell me, what would you do in that moment? Would you speed up and risk losing control, or would you drive straight to the nearest police station and hope for safety? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know. How would you survive if you realized the real danger might not be outside your car, but sitting quietly in the back seat with you? If that story made your heart race, then don't just sit in the dark. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss another terrifying tale like this. Go ahead and tap the like button if you are gripping. And trust me, you'll want to stay with me until the very end of this video, because the next story takes fear to an entirely new level. A house that refuses to let its owners go. So, don't look away. Don't click off. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the darker the night becomes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to a house that refuses to let its owners go. Imagine moving into a place you thought was your safe haven, only to discover that the walls themselves breathe with malice, that every door creak is a warning, and every shadow hides something that wants you to stay forever. Story 6. The House That Wouldn't Let Go. Our next story takes you inside such a home, where escape isn't just difficult, it's impossible. They thought they had found the deal of a lifetime. A spacious old house at the edge of town, big enough for their growing family with towering windows, creaking staircases, and a sprawling yard. The realtor brushed off the price drop as market conditions, but locals whispered that the home carried a history. A history so dark that no tenant before them had ever stayed for long. At first it seemed charming. The kids laughed while running down the long hallways, and the parents. But almost immediately, things felt off. The house was always cold, no matter how high they turned up the heat. Drafts swept through the rooms like unseen hands brushing against their skin. Doors that had been locked the night before would stand wide open in the morning. And in the dead of night, faint whispers echoed through the halls, whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Then the house began taking things. Keys, wallets, toys, even photographs from the mantle, gone, as if the house was stripping away little pieces of their lives. And worse, when they slept, they weren't alone. The father woke to find long scratches across his arms, marks he swore were not there when he went to bed. The children complained of hands tugging at their blankets, and the mother often bolted upright, gasping, because she felt the weight of someone sitting at the foot of her bed. As the days dragged on, the house grew bolder. The doors, windows wouldn't shatter, even when struck with heavy objects. The family was trapped. The home they thought was their sanctuary had become their prison. Desperate, they called in a priest, hoping that an exorcism would free them. But when he began to pray, the house turned violent. The walls bled. Dark red streaks seeped from the cracks in the plaster, dripping down like veins bursting open. The voices grew louder, screaming in rage. The crucifix in the priest's hand twisted, as if something unseen. And in that moment, the family realized the truth. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. They ran. With the priest's help, they forced open the front door, only for it to slam shut behind them with such force it shattered the frame. They never looked back. The house was condemned, locked up by the town, its windows boarded, its yard overgrown, but still, it stands, waiting, as though it's holding silent. Would you live in a haunted house if the rent was free, or would no amount of money convince you to step inside? Let me know in the comments. Imagine being trapped in a house that refuses to let you leave, and no one ever knowing your story. Don't let these terrifying tales disappear into silence. Hit that subscribe button and share this video so the nightmare lives on. Because if you leave now without supporting, the house just might come looking for you. But as horrifying as it is to be trapped inside a house that refuses to let you go, at least the family knew what they were up against. Imagine, instead, walking the quiet halls of a hospital, where the danger doesn't come from creaking walls or locked doors, but from the spirits of those who never left. Up next is a story that takes us deep into a place of suffering, healing, and unexplainable horrors, the haunted hospital where the dead still walk among the living. Story 7. The Visitor at 3 a.m. The storm had been raging for hours. Thunder shook the old house like a living thing, and rain lashed against the windows in relentless sheets. Inside, the world felt muted, wrapped in a blanket of uneasy silence, except for the occasional flicker of lights that made the shadows dance across the walls. It was just after 3 a.m., the hour most people never see, the hour when the line between the living and the dead feels thinner than ever. Alone in the house, the man sat on his couch with only the steady hum of the TV for comfort, his dog curled at his feet. And then, 3 slow knocks, not rushed, not polite, but deliberate, each one echoing through the storm. The dog's head shot up, ears pointed, and a deep growl rumbled in its throat. Another knock, louder this time, then silence. The man's breath caught. No one should be outside at this hour, not in a storm like this. But the silence. A voice came next, soft, almost sweet, calling his name. Not a stranger's voice, a voice he knew, a voice he thought he'd never hear again. It was his brother's. His brother, who had died 5 years earlier. The man's blood ran cold. His dog barked and clawed at the door, backing away as though whatever stood outside wasn't welcome. Trembling, he moved toward the peephole, every step feeling heavier than the last. He pressed his eye to the small glass circle and saw him, his brother, standing there in the rain, smiling. But there was something wrong. His skin was too pale, his eyes too dark. And that smile, it didn't look human anymore. It stretched too wide. The man staggered back, heart hammering in his chest. The knocks turned violent, rattling the door in its frame. The voice outside dropped lower, distorted. And then came the sound of nails, long sharp nails scraping down the wood, leaving trails deep enough to almost break through. The man grabbed his keys, snatched up his dog, and ran out the back door into the storm, never once daring to look behind him. By morning, his neighbors would whisper about what they had seen. The same figure, standing outside his front door, still knocking, still smiling, So tell me, which do you think is scarier? A stranger pounding on your door at 3 a.m., or the face of someone you loved, someone you buried, standing there waiting to be let in? Tonight, we've journeyed together through 7 terrifying true horror stories, each one a chilling reminder that the world we live in isn't as safe or as ordinary as we'd like to believe. From the whispers in hospital corridors, to the car that trailed a lone driver through the night, to the house that refused to release its grip on its owners. These are not just tales, but encounters that left behind scars, emotional, physical, and sometimes spiritual. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these stories shook you the most? Have you ever had an experience that made you question what's real and what isn't? Drop your scariest moment in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this video made your heart race, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another night of true horror. Like this video to help it reach more people who love the thrill of the unknown. And of course, share it with a friend who swears they're too brave to be scared. If you enjoyed this, I have something even darker waiting for you on our next episodes. The most haunted places ever caught on camera, where the spirits don't just linger, they show themselves. And remember, some stories never truly end. They just wait for the right time, for the right place, and maybe for their next victim.